10-9-876-5432-1, test.
Good morning. My name is Jim Schneider, and I'm president of the Atlanta Planning Advisory Board. I've got a statement I'd like to read first concerning the bond referendum that's to be held Tuesday. The Atlanta Planning Advisory Board, the umbrella organization for the 24 neighborhood planning units, which are the official citizen advisory bodies of city government, at its regular meeting in March of this year, voted to support the 1988 general obligation bond issue, which the voters of the City of Atlanta will vote on in the citywide referendum to be held on May 3rd, 1988. The consensus of the members of APAB was that the bond issue is critically needed by the city to maintain the infrastructure that supports the daily workings of the city and its citizens. Bridges, streets, traffic signals, fire stations, and parks are all items that affect us daily. The property tax increase that will be necessary to pay off the bonds was discussed and found to be a significant increase to the overall tax burden of a property owner in the city. But the repairs and replacements of the portions of the city's infrastructure can no longer be put off. It has been 13 years since the last general obligation bond issue in the City of Atlanta. APAB, while voting to support the bond referendum, asked where the administration and City Council has been for the last 13 years. It is clear that our bridges, streets, and parks have not suddenly fallen into disrepair. Our elected officials have not had the courage to face up to what they see as political disaster, a bond referendum and a millage rate increase. So instead, they have used the declining funds from community development block grants from the federal government to avoid bond referendums. And the city has met some of its smaller needs from such grants and has also gotten Underground Atlanta from that source. Even now, with the referendum almost upon us, there is almost complete silence from the mayor and council about the bond issue. Why aren't the mayor and council out personally trying to gather the support for the referendum? APAB, in its recommendation of support for the referendum, made it clear that it cannot support the manner in which the bond referendum has been brought to the citizens of Atlanta. The lack of long-range planning and fiscal responsibility with regard to the physical systems needed to provide services to the city is too frequently heard complaint from citizens. City government's focus on the more glamorous aspects of the city, such as underground and the Democratic Convention, underscore that lack of planning. APAB would rather have the tax burden reduced than increased, but no alternative has been suggested. The infrastructure of the city will only deteriorate further and cost more later. The issue of effective city leadership in city government must be separated from the issue of the bond referendum. We support the entire city bond referendum on May 3rd, 1988, and we must also get involved to make City Council, and particularly Mayor Young, be diligent in providing the services that the city is legally mandated to deliver. Thank you. Well, at our vote, there was concern from various citizens about the tax increase itself, various members of the neighborhood planning units. But the problem comes down that while we don't like the way we feel that City Council seems to be driven into this bond referendum, clearly the need that the bridges and streets, the traffic signals, if we don't get those, then we're really going to lose a lot of the ability to provide the atmosphere for development, the bettering of our individual neighborhoods, the community commercial areas we're talking about, things like widening of Campbellton Road that have been on the books for years, but they can't get the money for it. And that CDBG and the $4 million annual bond fund that we've had so far just has not been enough to deal with these big projects. So while we don't like the process, the consensus was that we need the bond referendum to be able to deal with the infrastructure improvements.
You're accusing the mayor and the city council of concentrating on glamour projects and ignoring infrastructure. Could you elaborate on why you think that's happening?
Well, I think it's very much a political item, that this council is very political. They don't get out to neighborhoods to listen. My particular councilman, Buddy Folks, not to necessarily pick on one person, but Buddy makes the comment that he won't come to neighborhood meetings unless they ask him. Well, it gets hard to, when we deal with a lot of subjects at our MPU meetings, if he doesn't come and just listen, doesn't have to make statements all the time, but listen to what we're saying, how does he know what we're saying? One person only has a limited amount of time to talk to people on the phone or in person. So when they don't come out and listen to us, how are they going to get the information? I've had a request in since January 25th to see the mayor for an hour of his time, and I've yet to see it, and here we are almost in May. I got elected, in effect, citywide as APAB. We are all volunteers. We have no real power. But if you won't see us and talk to us, how can we communicate with them? So, in the sense that, yes, we are indicting them for, in effect, being more interested in doing the political thing and not the more difficult item of really dealing with the physical infrastructure in our city. And that's fairly evident, the fact that we've got this amount of money that's needed. And in fact, Chester Fournier, who's Commissioner of, I believe it's Public Works, indicated that he knows of at least like $350 to $600 million in additional projects. But we certainly can't, you can only ask voters to tax themselves so much before they will totally revolt.
Schools are a major part of this bond issue. What are your thoughts on the money destined for schools?
At the APAB meeting, we had the presentation by Pat Glisson, who's the Commissioner of Finance. We did not have a presentation from the school board. Personally, I think that is a very important issue. APAB did not take a vote on that, and at that point I really cannot represent APAB since we did not take a vote on it at that time.
Since you've been in touch with neighborhood people, do you think they're leaning more toward voting for or against the bond?
I do hear a lot of negative out there from various neighborhood people. I think part of it, though, is, again, they're dealing with the leadership aspects and not necessarily with the need for the infrastructure. And the point I make to people is that we really need to separate the issues, that the bond referendum is so important, and that we may be frustrated with city government in both the administrative and legislative sides, but we're, in effect, cutting off our nose to spite our face if we defeat the bond referendum because we don't like the way the referendum has been presented to us. Things like timing on the reassessments. It happens the first 2 weeks of April every year. It's not as if that's something that suddenly sprang up. Again, the timing, because they're being driven by somebody else in their own planning process, that's the part that is very upsetting, and we ought to be able to deal with this in a long-range context. And I would hope that Shirley Franklin and the mayor would basically every couple of years do this when we have that need, and people have a chance to think about it and see how the improvements do affect our ability to deliver services.
Given your dislike for the way city government is being run, is there anything that the NPU plans to do to kind of get the council moving in the direction that you would like them?
Well, one of the things is just what we're doing here today, and that's basically trying to get legitimacy that we are a voice, we do not have power, but that we have people out there who are concerned and trying to make the process work. And hopefully they will listen to us. They won't have to do everything we say. I think it would be inappropriate because we don't need another layer of elected officials. But we are a conduit for the citizens to make comments to city government. Some people in city government listen to us and we get some response, others don't. I think it needs to be stronger. We certainly don't need to dictate to city government what happens.
How much of that negative feedback that you've gotten so far do you think has to do with the timing, the assessments, the recent stories about travel expenses by council, and now they're asking again for more money for something else? I believe Councilman Williams is anti-bond issues.
Well, I believe, strongly that a good bit of that is there. To me, though, the timing, if we had enough time to discuss these issues, we might not all resolve all of the issues, but people will feel more comfortable. Last night, for instance, at Neighborhood Planning Unit M meeting, a gentleman was looking through the list that was presented by citizens for the referendum, and his concern was that he didn't have a chance to look at them, and that other people felt that the list had been drafted very hastily. Well, again, if there were enough time to discuss it, they would know that all those projects have been on the books and well planned for some period of time. A good example would be the Spring Street Viaduct or Campbellton Road widening, that they have been there a long time. And if you had been around the neighborhood planning process, you would know that. So when they picked them out, you would know they weren't just half-baked. They weren't necessarily down to engineering drawings, but they were at least in a manner that will be able to move forward fairly quickly. The point that Hosea Williams, and I respect Hosea because I think we need to have people like that in the sense of being out there and speaking up, but I do think Hosea has missed the fundamental point of separating the leadership issue from the infrastructure issue, and on that point I believe he's wrong by putting them both together and lumping them at one and being anti the whole thing.
You represent Midtown, and certainly it would seem on surface that your constituents, I'll call them, might be able more readily to pay for a property tax increase than say the people of Southeast Atlanta. And certainly it would appear that your streets, your sewer systems, your roads, your garbage, everything in Midtown might be done a little faster, a little better than it is in Southeast Atlanta. Convince me as an MPU in the Southeast area person why I should go for this bond referendum.
Okay. First, if you look at the number of items on the list, Midtown has a very few items. The only big item that jumps out at you is Piedmont Park, and Piedmont Park happens to be an item that is a regional park and not a neighborhood park, and I would suggest you'd find on sheer numbers more people from other parts of the city using it than people from the Midtown, the commercial corridor, if you would. I think you find that the list of items on that referendum covers citywide, parks. We're talking about a lot of items as far as police precincts in zones 1, 2, and 6. My zone, there's a new one proposed up for the Piedmont-Lindbergh area, but that's actually NPU-F. We got involved in zone 5. The downtown items are really citywide issues, the new criminal justice center, that sort of thing. Those are citywide items. Streets and improvements, we all use those streets and improvements. Bridges, if a bridge were to collapse, and there's apparently a rumor about the Williamsburg Bridge in New York that they closed because basically that kind of problem. If you can't use the streets, how can we get to work? How can we have visitors, the jobs that are dependent on that in downtown? Campbellton Road clearly is not downtown. That's affecting the commercial life out in the southwest portion of the city. There are a lot of items. Again, there's something like $350 million that I have heard for drainage on the southeast side of the city, and there's not a dime in this bond referendum for that. We can only deal with so much before the people, just don't have the money to pay it. I would suggest, too, that while you might say the people in Midtown have more, their assessed valuation on their home might be higher, still they're paying proportionally the same kinds of dollars. And the benefits that we are all getting, it seems to me that we have to have it, because if we don't have it, then people just won't be able, their jobs aren't going to be there in one sense or another. People will move away because it's not a very interesting area because you can't move around, or there are too many potholes, or bridges are out, that sort of thing. And we're talking about basic stuff. We're not talking about luxuries. And if I were saying, and I think there is one item in there that I do have a problem with, and that's roofs for basketball courts. I don't know that that's a necessity. But if you look through the whole list, there are like 1 or 2 items that fit in that category, and the rest of them really come down to basic, deliver the services kinds of things, like fire stations. Fire stations particularly come back to an individual property owner because his insurance rates are a function of how the city is rated citywide as far as insurance underwriting. And so if you have a good system, and we do have the best, as far as I know, the best insurance rating in the country, but part of keeping that is having an up-to-date fire system and having the planning in there so that when the raters come by and look at the city, they understand that we are in fact maintaining that quality of service and keep the rates as low as possible.
You go out and sell this? I hear you here today. Are you going to actively put aside your differences with the council on the way the city has been led?
Well, in the sense that last night at Neighborhood Planning Unit M, of which I'm also a member because I work in the downtown area, we did have a rather long discussion of the item. At my NPU in April, I discussed it. I'm a volunteer. We've got the mayor and council who are paid people. They are getting paid. There are a lot of staff members. The point I have is that I don't see them out. I don't see them being quoted in the press. I'm also a real estate broker. I've got a job to do. I'm not getting paid to be down here this morning doing this. I'm out doing it anyway. And the point is, I think we need to see the elected officials. They are asking us, they have the legal authority to impose those taxes if, in fact, the bond referendum is passing. I want to see those people out promoting it. And that, you know, I'll do my part, but I think I want to see them do their part, too.
And your part is, as you see it, is to say that you're not going to make more of an effort than you are making now to promote this. Is the NPU?
I don't have any good ideas as to how to do that. I would if, you know, if we had that kind of thing, but I don't know. That's one reason holding this kind of press conference is a way to, you know, make our point that and supporting the city as far as we can, but then objecting to the manner in which it came up, and that we don't like to tax ourselves, but the sense was that we really had no alternative. No one has come up with a way to finance this other than with the millage rate increase.
Everything seems to have been going over pretty thorough. How was education left out, the education?
Well, we are a creation of city government as far as the neighborhood planning units and the Atlanta Planning Advisory Board, and in the sense that we are concerned about education, but if you look at our agendas dealing with zonings, variances, delivery of city services, frankly, we're probably short on time on a volunteer basis, and that would be the reason for it. Not that we are lacking in interest in education, but lacking in time to deal with it. Thank you very much.